question I have is with energy medicine yoga, I know that over the coming classes, we're going to have different experiences. Sometimes they'll be seated, sometimes they'll be moving. I know there's a lot of different variations we're going to experience, which is wonderful. But in terms of like really experiencing the benefit of the moving the energy through the body and opening up these energy channels and noticing that mental, emotional, physical, energetic benefit. How often do you recommend students practice this? Is there a kind of a time, it's kind of a sweet spot in terms of time? Is it 10 minutes at a time, 20 minutes at a time? Does it matter? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in terms of the benefits, you're going to see benefits from this right away. And maybe people are already feeling, you do that practice, and we did it over 20 minutes, but you can do it in your own day, in your morning, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And the more that you start to do that, the more you start to repattern the body. So especially if you're working with a health issue, you really want to start to do that practice, just that little EM yoga wake up practice. Now, over the coming weeks and months, we're going to share lots of practices, but they're always or most often going to start with some variation of that practice. If you're struggling or working with a health issue, chances are all of those alignments of energy that we just practiced are not in alignment. And if that issue is long-standing, that patterning that we're doing, that repatterning that we're doing takes a little bit longer because you've had this habit of being unwell for X amount of time. And the body recognizes that as a pattern and as a habit. And so we just do this once, and that's great for right now. But some of you might find, especially depression is one that really pulls you out of that crossover pattern. You might find in an hour, wow, I feel tired again. And so you want to do that wake up practice again. So ideally, this becomes a practice. Energy medicine yoga becomes a practice that you do daily. And whether you give it, I'd rather see you doing 10 minutes a day than an hour and a half once a week. So and then you can kind of build on that depending on what your needs are. And as you start to sink into this practice more and more and learn more of the practices that we're going to share with you, you're going to see that your body craves them. It craves doing this because it's like, if you go camping, right? And you wake up and all of your routines are different now because you don't just walk to your bathroom and wash up, right? It's a different experience. If you wake up camping and you don't get out of your tent and go brush your teeth right away, you kind of feel fuzzy and weird and it's like a little bit off. And then you're like, why do I feel a little, wow, I kind of don't feel grounded yet. And you're like, oh, I haven't brushed my teeth yet. That's the first thing I usually do in the morning. It's going to become like that for you. This is going to be something that your body craves because it is leading you into healing and it is leading you into this optimal self. And I notice that people really notice it when they practice it for a while and then they stop and they're like, oh, I don't feel good anymore. And then they want to start practicing again. So there really isn't, the beautiful thing about EM yoga is that it's tailored to you. And so you're going to find what your sweet spot is depending on what your needs are.
I know when I started practicing different forms of energy medicine years ago, the more intensely I got into the energy medicine, the more I started to have these kind of old physiological traumatic energetic blockages come up, like for an example, an injury that was like 12 years ago and then hadn't really, maybe I had some restriction in my shoulder but didn't have that injury pain, and then doing the energy medicine, that pain came back. But as I continued the energy medicine, then that pain went away forever. I know when we're dealing with detoxing the body, for example, with nutrition, with herbs, there's something called the Herxheimer reaction, which is kind of this, you kind of feel worse before you feel better. And then you feel better and then you don't have any of those previous issues anymore because that kind of becomes permanent, right? Or at least as long as you don't continue those same patterns that led to that issue. Is there any kind of similar thing that happens with energy medicine yoga? And if so, is it kind of, what is that experience like? What can people kind of just keep an eye out for as they're continuing to dive into this practice?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nathan. Thank you for bringing that up, because absolutely, as you start to do this work and you start to, I like that word detox, you start to detox the energy systems of the body. You start to remove these blockages and pain in the body, which is energy that's stuck. So we start to bring everything into harmony, right? That idea of coherence and harmony. And as you start to open the body up, those things come up, because everything that we have not fully metabolized, whether it's trauma or stress or physical injury that hasn't completed its cycle and brought us to that healing place where we're free of it, is stuck in the tissues of the body. So that's not just injuries, but that's things like trauma and things like stress that is stuck in the tissues of the body, and really important for them to be released. And as we start to move the energy and as we start to move the body and open areas up that may have been constricted, then we're going to find that release, but we also might find that detoxing effect happening, that we don't feel so good. And there's another reason for that in energy medicine yoga that we'll get into a little bit more as we go forward. But I talked about that we have patterns and habits, and that those diseases that we have are also habitual patterns of energy in the body. And we have an energy system that resists change and transformation. And so you might feel a little sick or a little nauseous as we start to move through and release these energies and bring the body into coherence, because there's this, it's sort of like this, I'm bad metaphors this morning. I'm not going to use that. The body just resists that. And so we can feel unwell. And so things that you can do if you do start to feel that, instead of quitting, right? Because a lot of people are like, this stinks, I don't want to do this, it doesn't feel good, I want to feel good. You do want to feel good. But like that detox curve that you talked about, sometimes you feel a little worse before you feel better. And so some things to do to help that is a warm bath with salt, whether it's Epsom salt or sea salt, to start to detox the tissues as well and the energies as well. And I'll share with you some things over the coming weeks that can also help to move things through. But that warm bath is really one of the most beautiful things. And if you don't have the ability to take a bath, you can just take a shower. You can put some oil on the body, and we can talk about that in another session as well. But you can sort of oil the body up a little bit and then get in the shower, warm water, and that will also help to calm the nervous system, which is a little dysregulated when you start to do these changes and bring these alternate practices to them. So stay with it. And it will get better on the other side. And that full release and resolution of these injuries and of these stressors and of these traumas is so beautiful that it's really worth it. It's worth the journey.